My guests today are John and Rosalina Steiner. John and Rosalina are multifamily apartment investors who own and operate 25 doors in Southern California, primarily in Ventura County. They spent the bulk of their careers working corporate finance jobs, and they started investing in real estate on the side about 15 years ago. And then a few years ago, they transitioned to managing their real estate investments full time. They're currently also real estate agents, and they also coach others on how to invest in and operate rental properties. John, Rosalina, thanks so much for joining us today to share your story and your real estate journey and insights about how to successfully invest and buy and hold real estate.
Sure, we're glad to be here, Andrew. Thanks for having us.
We connected first by email because you reached out to me after listening to an earlier podcast episode. And as we were chatting and I learned more about your story, I thought it would be great to share it on the podcast with our listeners. I was reading your profile bio a little bit, and I actually didn't know you spent time in Houston. How long were you there? Where were you actually?
We were in Houston and Corpus. Rosalina and I met in a geology class at the University of Houston. She was with Exxon and I was with Conoco. And then oil was going crazy in the early 80s, and then it tanked. And so we moved back to Southern California.
Got it. Yeah, I grew up in Houston myself, so I spent almost all my childhood there. So it's near and dear to my heart. I grew up in the southeast, like Clear Lake City, near where NASA is.
Huh.
We know that well, and we spent time in Corpus. Yes. We really liked the South a lot. I would say that what we learned, Andrew, at a young age, relatively young age for us, was a couple of things. We were in the oil business, and it was extremely volatile, and we had a young family. But we, at the same time, learned about passive income, which oil and gas royalties, which was huge for us and very impactful on kind of our approach to how we were going to try to strategically put our financial lives together.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that dovetails, I think, with probably later how you got into real estate investing. Tell us a little bit first about your career backgrounds before real estate investing. Like, I just know you were working in corporate finance, but what were you doing and all that?
Sure. So I grew up in Southern California. I got a law degree. I was trained to go get a job. I got a job. I was a landman with a couple of major oil companies. Rosalina worked in a technical side as a downhole wireline processor at Exxon and then at Schlumberger. She did seismic data mapping. And I was raised where you go to school. Rosalina came from the interior of Mexico. It was a little different story. We met in a college class. So long story short, oil tanked in the late 80s. We moved to Southern California. I got a job with the FDIC. I was doing loan workout. Rosalina finished her college degree, got an MBA. She worked at UCLA and UC Irvine for 25 years and ended her career in corporate America as a senior budget analyst for one of the 14 vice chancellors at UCLA. I ended up being a CFO and a chief credit officer at a private lender for a Korean company in downtown LA. And I spent about half of my career doing loan workouts. So I saw a lot of things you shouldn't do in business.
I imagine that probably helped later when you started taking out mortgages of your own for real estate investing. Tell us a little bit about what got you started in real estate investing in the first place.
I would say, and I'm not being funny, it was kind of out of desperation. We had to figure out, how are we not going to eat dog food in retirement? How are we going to provide for a lifestyle that would have consistent returns? And Rosalina has some brothers that we're investing in homes and shopping centers. And these guys didn't have our education and they were hitting it out of the park. Yes. And we kind of scratched our heads like, what were we doing wrong? So we bought a little townhouse in a nice area in Ventura County, had the best school district. We got lucky, it did well. I mean, in 2 years, our investment quadrupled. And we're smart enough to know we're not smarter than the large macroeconomic swings. So we took the money, we did our first 1031 exchange into a 6-unit apartment building.
Got it. So you, as I understand, you currently own and operate 25 doors. First, what's the mix in terms of singles, doubles, fourplex, 5 and above, et cetera?
Sure. We have 2 fourplexes, we have a 6plex and an 8plex, and then a statistical outlier, which is a house in Calabasas, which is a nice subdivision in Southern California.
Got it. So mostly multifamily. And how many are free and clear at this point?
Well, we're like most major corporations. None of them are free and clear. We have debt on all of them, and we'll get into a little bit later, but one of our methods for buying properties, because we are, we started as pretty middle-class people, buy a house, fix it up, sell it, use proceeds towards a down payment on an apartment, and then use some of the proceeds for the next house. And so we've got a house now which is far bigger than what we need. We may end up selling it, and we've contemplated, to your point, Andrew, paying off a couple of the properties, but that wouldn't allow us to continue to invest, and we're going to continue to invest until our last breath.
That's great. That's great.
Good plan, right?
Yeah. So how then, can you talk about like how, at least starting out at the beginning, how did you come up with the first down payments to purchase those first properties? Assuming you didn't start out as a multimillionaire, and so what was your process for kind of hand cranking your investing journey into motion?
Well, I left a company about 20 years ago. There was a 401k. Every wealth manager would tell you not to do this. We took it. We paid the tax on it. We borrowed about a third of the down payment from one of Rosalina's brothers. And back then you could get into an investment property with 10% down. Yes. And we got in, and thanks to Rosalina's brother, we got this first property, and it, through no luck of our own, it went up fourfold in 2 years.
Got it. So then what happens? Do you refinance at some point so you can then use those proceeds to purchase another property? How does it work?
Sure. So one of our other techniques is we buy the worst house in the best neighborhood we can. Rosalina and I spend a year or two fixing it up to a high degree. We get the biggest home equity line of credit we can possibly get. We go to 3 or 4 lenders. We get the one that will give us a huge HELOC, because we know we'll never come up with enough of a down payment for the next apartment. We're going to need probably about a third from some other source, and so we'll borrow it off the HELOC. We'll put it down on the property. We'll sell the house, pay off the HELOC, pay off the first mortgage, and go do it again. And we've done this 3 or 4 times, Andrew, and it's worked for us.
So can you say more about what you mean when you say you sell the house? So because as I understand, your primary business is buy and hold real estate for rental income. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So what do you mean by sell the house?
Oh, so the home we live in, we're gonna buy, we're gonna fix up.
We're gonna fix it up. We're waiting. Once it's fixed up, we'll put it in the market. We have a huge equity there.
We usually have pretty good equity in these homes we buy. And then we'll, after we've taken some of the money from the home equity line of credit towards a down payment on an apartment and bought the apartment, then we'll list the home on the market. And that's one of the reasons we got our real estate license, was not only to train others, but to mitigate our transaction costs. And so we'll sell the house. We may rent for a year. We may not. We may move into one of our apartments. We've done that. And then look around for another good deal in a nice neighborhood. And does that make sense?
I think so. The homes you're buying, are they meant to be like owner occupied, where you're kind of rehabbing them while you're sort of owner occupying them? You can you obviously create a lot of additional value from the remodeling. You take out a HELOC from that, and then you sell it. Maybe you can even capture the capital gains exclusion from that. In that way, you're sort of creating capital to invest in rental real estate. Have I got that right? Basically,
that's exactly right. And when we first started, like we described, we had to borrow a little money. We had to sacrifice some of our 401ks. As we built up our portfolio, we started to do cash out refinances on some of our properties. And as you know, it takes several years to season these properties. And we've done that 2 or 3 times where we've pulled out, tax-free cash off of these properties to use as down payments for another property.
Gotcha. Okay. So I know you focus primarily in Ventura County. Are all your properties located there? If not, how many of your 25 doors are in Ventura County?
So all of our apartments are in Ventura County. And like I mentioned earlier, we have a statistical outlier, which is a home in Calabasas, which is LA County.
Got it. Why did you choose Ventura County as your investing focus area?
Well, our oldest son lives in Ventura County, and he has this attraction called grandchildren. So we moved here. That was one of the reasons. But from a financial standpoint, I think Rosalina would agree that the rate of return has been much higher in Ventura County. The cost per unit is lower here.
So far.
Changing
a lot, yes.
So Santa Barbara, we could never afford to buy in, and we wouldn't, even if we could, because the cash-on-cash return, which we'll talk about in a minute, isn't good. LA County, city of LA, and good parts of LA County have huge restrictions on rent control, which we're personally averse to. Orange County has some areas that we would buy in, but it's too far away for us now. And we were I was greatly influenced by a real estate lawyer who used to write in the LA Times about 40 years ago. His name was Robert J. Bruss. And his mantra was, don't buy more than an hour from where you live. We probably would never achieve the level of wealth that some might by viewing this more as a paper investment. But Rosalina and I not only love each other, we like each other, and we like spending time together. And so we work on the units together. We don't do a lot of the physical work ourselves, but because of Rosalina's finance background and mine, she does the Excel spreadsheets every month for the profit and loss, and at the end of the year can give it to the accountant. So.
Got it. What would you say are the kind of neighborhoods that you're focusing on investing in Ventura County? Are these like B-class assets and working class neighborhoods? Like, can you describe a little bit, where you're investing?
That's exactly right. We buy, they probably start out candidly as C-class properties when we buy them. We like close to the beach because we think there's an inherent value there. So we like, and maybe some of your viewers have never heard of these places, Port Hueneme, right next to Oxnard, the most reasonably priced place in Ventura County. The next one is Oxnard. We like that a lot. One of the byproducts is there's a heavy Hispanic population in some of these areas. Rosalina is a native of Mexico. She speaks Spanish. She develops, I develop a trust with folks, but it takes a little longer because, Rosalina speaks Spanish, and there's an immediate clicking there.
And they're not all Hispanic.
No, not at all. And then we just bought a building in January in Camarillo, which is probably, along with the city of Ventura, the nicest parts of Ventura County.
So why did you choose the sort of B or starting C class asset profile as your focus? Like what was most attractive about that profile?
It's a great question. It's the rate of return. We think we're compassionate capitalists, but at the end of the day, cash flow is king at our house. And we think we give a much better product to a tenant than what they're paying for. At the same time, in Southern California, we could go to some really bad neighborhoods, put 0 down and make a rate of return. Or we could go to Santa Monica and put 50% down and pray to break even. So we're looking for something in between. And the first lender we ever went to met us and looked at Rosalina and said, because she's a petite person, if Rosalina can walk into the complex during the day without fear for her life, it's a place to consider. So short answer, B-class properties that start out as C, we fix them up to a high level. We do things like white shaker style cabinets, quartz countertops, wide plank flooring. you attract a really good quality of tenant. People weren't meant to live that close together, Andrew, in apartments, and so you need people that are understanding of that and respectful and friendly. And so when we fix these places up, we get a good quality of tenant. And I know we'll talk a little later about the type of tenant profile and everything, so that during COVID, we've maintained a pretty good cash flow.
Got it. Okay, so I definitely want to dive into those things here in a moment. I wanted to first dwell a little bit on the remodeling and rehab process, because it sounds like that's, a really critical aspect of sort of creating value, buying a C-class property in a good neighborhood, upgrading it to a B. Can you talk a little bit about, first of all, at this point, do you have a core team of rehab folks who, like, who to call for specific things? And if so, how did you first build that team?
Okay, so if we're really being blunt about this, really block and tackle about this, we went to our gardener and we said, Ignacio, we just bought a foreclosure, and when you put a marble on one end of the front room in the front house, it rolls to the opposite end of the house. What do we do? I've got the person for you, Mr. John. So all kidding aside, we have developed over the last 15 years a core group of most of your problems. You need a handyman and you need a plumber. And so both have lived in units of ours in the past, which we take as a big success. So we have the core team, if you will. And when a unit becomes vacant in the state of California, you're not limited by what you can raise the rent to. And I don't want to give you the wrong idea. Our rents are at market or slightly below. But when we buy these places, invariably, a lot of the landlords have just they've run a different business model. Their business model is, I'm not going to fix it up. Don't ask me to fix anything, and I'm not going to raise the rent on you. Our model is slightly different. So we literally know that and it costs us $25,000 to $30,000 to redo a unit. That includes, we put new sewers in, new water lines. We put high-line cabinets in the kitchen. We redo the bathrooms, scrape the ceilings, recessed lights. Wouldn't you say? Ceiling fans.
Yeah, really create a home for our tenants.
You install ceiling fans, or you take them out?
No, we install them. And so when we get done, these places look pretty nice. And like Rosalina said, she's the one that does the decorating, and she wants to create an environment where someone feels like they're in a home, not just some shack that some landlord's getting rents on every month.
Yeah. If you're replacing water lines and things like sewer lines, does that mean you're digging stuff up and taking the home down to the studs? Is that correct?
The first part, absolutely. So our 6-unit building by the beach in Oxnard, we went there one day because our plumber was replacing the sewer lines, and we walk in and there's a pile of sand 8 feet tall in the front room, which concerned us a bit because that told us what the foundation was on. But at the same time, you have to do that. So necessarily you have to have some units that are vacant before you can do this.
Got it. You're able to do that for just 20, 30 grand a unit?
Yes.
Yeah, we act as the general. We pull permits on the significant things. But because I learned this when I was an underwriting manager at a lender, and the owner of the company told me, the president said, John, if you use the same lawyer every time, or the same group of lawyers, you can get them to negotiate their prices down because they're going to get repeat business from you. Mm-hmm. And so we took that lesson, and for $25,000 to $30,000, we do a unit, and that includes the sewer lines and the water lines, and they look nice and they last.
And what are the other major remodeling? Like you must have a checklist at this point of things that, you know, you can almost just like rinse and repeat. What are the major items? I think you've alluded to some of them, but
Sure.
kind of more comprehensively, what are they?
Sure. So the first thing we do is curb appeal. A lot of places, you pull up to them and they just don't look very nice. They don't look appealing. And we're trying to appeal to the best set of tenants, clients, our customers that we can. So a lot of our tenants have kids. So the first thing we do for safety purposes is put a nice black wrought iron fence in that's 4 or 5 feet tall. Has gates that open up and everything. And then we repaint the unit, the exterior. Typically, they don't have sprinklers. We put sprinklers in landscape. And so they, like Rosalina said a moment ago, they start to look like a home. They look like an attractive place that someone would want to live in. And that's our first step. The next step is slowly raising rents, and then as tenants tend to move out, because there is an inevitable turnover, we'll take the unit, and if on the checklist, again, flooring, scraping ceilings, new lighting.
When you're scraping ceilings of like popcorn ceiling, you mean?
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Take the popcorn ceilings out. We've learned, we started using, if we want to get real detailed, a shade of white that didn't look real bright. And these are older buildings we buy because that's all we can afford typically. And these are older neighborhoods. And most of the housing stock for apartments is not brand new that's owned by mom and pops like us. So we'll paint with a bright white. We'll put in chrome ceiling fans. We'll put in stainless steel appliances in the kitchen, quartz countertops. This is what appeals to tenants currently. We'll put in real nice, you've probably seen them, Andrew, these backsplashes now that are these kind of has a Hispanic look to it, like the old floors they used to do. And we'll go to the ceiling with those.
Right.
They go, wow, they can't believe these places. And so our competition doesn't do that.
What do you use? What kind of flooring product do you use?
We use a wide plank vinyl flooring, and the product now has gotten to such a quality that it looks like wood. And when you do this on the floor, it feels like wood.
Got it.
So it's all easy to maintain for the
that's a good
tenants,
point.
right? But where we really put a lot of emphasis is our kitchen, because that's where they spend most of the time. We create a lot of space, even if the kitchen is small to start with. We remodel it so it looks homey and family, and they can work with the kids. So we put a lot of emphasis in bathroom and kitchens. Yes.
Yeah, that's very important. What do you do to the bathroom typically?
So we've changed. We used to have our handyman come in and put a tile shower in with a tub. What we found now is the best thing that lasts the longest and tenants seem to appreciate more is a fiberglass insert that has a tub. It looks nice, easy to clean, doesn't get mildew problems. We never, by the way, we never call it mold. There's no such thing as mold. It's called mildew. But that's what we do. And we put a nice vanity in. And Rosalina's point a minute ago, if you use the vinyl flooring, if you're downstairs, you can do it everywhere. We made the mistake of learning you can't put hard flooring upstairs, because if you have a tenant that's a night owl and is up late at night, like you are, Andrew, we've seen from they can't sleep because there's this pounding upstairs on the floor. So we put carpet upstairs, vinyl flooring downstairs. Got it.
So much good stuff there. So the fiberglass bathtub insert. So does that go all the way to the ceiling? Do you use the ones that go all the way to the ceiling?
No, because typically we're going to make sure there's a window in there. One of the problems we've had in bathrooms is a moisture accumulation. And so we make sure that there's usually a window, and if there isn't, we might add it to the bathroom. And one thing that we didn't mention is we always eventually end up putting new vinyl windows in the complex.
On the bed, yes.
Yeah. So how far up does it go then?
It probably goes
level to the window.
Right. So if the ceiling is 8 feet, we probably go 6 feet.
7 feet,
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay, so that's kitchen, bath, You scrape the ceilings, put in the vinyl plank flooring, you repaint. What else do you do? Anything in the bedrooms?
We put sconces on the walls, lighting. Rosalina's come up with, in high-end homes, you see baseboards that are really tall. So we put tall baseboards in the rooms. The bedrooms, all we end up doing is putting a ceiling fan with a light fixture, maybe a sconce. If they have those sliding doors, we put new sliding doors in. Again, we want it to be bright and light and give the tenant a feel of, it looks bigger, it looks quality.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you'll put carpet upstairs to soften the noise. How often are you changing out carpet? Just curious.
So that's the problem, right? Because carpet will last, it depends.
I mean, it depends on the tenant for sure.
That's exactly right. And it depends how long you hold a tenant, right? So we have one tenant that we bought the building 5 years ago. He's been there almost 10. He's got carpeted, we inherited. But he's vacuuming it every week. He's very fastidious. And we have other tenants that, if it lasts 3 or 4 years, we're lucky. So because of the cost of having to do that, if we get 5 years out of it, we're lucky.
And it also is a direct correlation in how they maintain the apartment based on their deposit. If we have a good deposit, the place stays in good shape. We used to be horrible at it, and we had to spend a lot of money. Now with a good deposit, they really want to maintain that place.
Yeah, it's funny how those things correlate. How much do you typically request for a deposit?
Sure.
A month's worth?
No, you got to get more than a month, because if things start to go sideways and they decide, because some of our tenant base, they need that deposit, they think, for the deposit in the next place. A lot of these folks are paycheck to paycheck, which we were for many years. So believe me, we're not criticizing it.
How do you get a paycheck to paycheck tenant to pay more than a month's deposit?
We've never, in 15 plus years, maybe we could count on one hand the number of times we've had a tenant object to the deposit. So we usually get a month and a half.
That's incredible.
If they had an excellent credit, we allow them to pay that deposit in 2 payments or 3 payments. So if they have excellent credit and we want that tenant, we allow them to pay that deposit in 2 or 3 payments.
That's amazing that you haven't gotten that much pushback over the years.
Never.
What is excellent credit in your eyes?
740, 720, anything above 700.
How often do you get a paycheck to paycheck tenant who has above 700?
Oh, we've been very lucky. If you search, we probably have most of our tenants. We were surprised. We had one that was 800.
We have one that's Section 8 with an 800 credit score.
I mean, those are the people that we want in our places.
We will take people in high 600s if we have to. But I agree with Rosalina. We try to get as close to 700 as we can.
Yes.
It's just amazing that you're able to find even 25 tenants who fit that profile, because it's certainly tough. I'm also very very that you're able to do all that remodeling for 25-30. I've done my fair share of remodeling, and I tend to remodel very similarly as you guys. Actually, a lot of the things that you were saying were exactly the same things I do on my checklist, but I don't even quite do all the stuff you do, and I have not been able to get it to that number.
Really?
On any unit.
We do a lot of the search on the everything, right, from the granite or whatever we're going to use. We search a lot. We use the 20% coupon. We save those and we buy the equipment when it's available. Lowe's or whatever, we're going to buy a really nice stove. We get it when it's on sale. So we save that because we know the sizes that we're going to use. So that helps a lot to on our total number at the end.
Well, you're so nice about it. We have an inventory in our garage of things as we pick them
Your
up.
own private showroom.
Yes, yes.
We do, and so we'll closet things away. Rosalina will be at Costco. She sees a sink on sale. She'll buy 3 of them. We
Yeah.
saw garbage disposals about a month and a half ago for $80. 1 1/3 horsepower,
Yes.
mowing. Bought
Yeah.
4 or 5. Put them away.
Yes, because
I guess with 25 doors, you know you'll need it for one or the others sooner or later. So
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. I would love to talk a little bit about tenant management and some of the best tips that you've learned for managing tenants. First of all, like, it sounds like you guys have really fantastic tenants, but I don't know if that's always been true throughout your investing history. If not, what are the most common causes of headaches or troubles that you have experienced with prior tenants, and how do you address?
We've had our share of bad tenants. Everybody does. It's a cross section of society. So what we have found is there's just a inextricable link between credit and respectful tenants. And so we really focus on employment and credit quality. And so we've had bad tenants. And so the mistakes we have made are when we get, and look, we've all been there. I mean, when we started out, this whole concept of fire, we probably lived fire unwillingly for 10 years when we were first married. But we get stories about people that have just had their credit stolen. That's a popular one. They don't believe everything you see on the credit report. It's not true. If there's a medical problem, we see that that's a problem in society, and so we'll overlook those kinds of credit dings. But in terms of tenants, we do have kind of a list of what we go through and look for, and it has to be very objective.
What are those things on the checklist?
Sure. Not to be too simplistic, but I think it starts and ends with credit and employment.
Right. And also, this is a perfect example. Probably you can talk about the new building, the A units, tenants that we did not pick. So they really were having issues with how they live. The gossip, right?
Hoarders. So we have
not maintaining the building the way we want it.
Yeah.
So this is the process that we're going on right now to clean up their act and let them know what we want on that building, how we want the place to look. We always tell them it is for your benefit. So one of the issues we have is people complaining about each other, and we never get involved with that.
So I'm just looking down a list, Andrew, of things that we do, because this is important to us. So we talked about employment, we talked about credit.
And what do you look for in employment, by the way?
Well, I think we're looking for someone that, a lot of our tenant base are essential workers. And so what we have found is that during COVID, for instance, all but one tenant has paid consistently. And we think that's due to the fact that we have essential workers. We have electricians, we have plumbers, we have handymen, we have a guy that runs a gentleman's club. We have all sorts of tenants. The one tenant that hasn't paid didn't have a consistent job, and that was the mistake we made.
So what are the markers you're looking for? Like, are you looking for how long they've been with the same employer, or are you looking for consistent deposits into a bank account that you can actually see every 2 weeks? What are you looking for?
If I was to confess, it's probably not that analytical for us. It's more, we hold an open, Rosalina runs an ad in Craigslist and Zillow, which fans out, as you know, to a bunch of sites. She gets 30, 40 phone calls in 10 days because there's a lack of affordable housing in Southern California. We hold a open house on a Saturday or a Sunday morning. We hand out applications. We charge $30, $40 to run credit because we belong to a local apartment owners association and they charge us to run it. Rosalina will run credit online. And it gives us a chance to meet the tenants. And we have to be very careful the way we kind of structure this and say it, because you have to go on objective criteria. But part of it inevitably is the people you meet. And so do we really look at the length of employment? Sure, we don't want someone that's been working at a place for 6 months, but like when we were employed, if they were in that industry for a number of years and they were at a new place for 6 months, it probably wouldn't bother us.
Okay. Are there any other things on your screening checklist?
No, I think it's pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward.
Meeting the people, the quality of the tenants, the quality of their credit score and their employment.
Do you run criminal and eviction checks?
Yeah.
How do you use those?
So we belong to the Apartment Owners Association of Southern California. And one of the criteria, I guess you would call it, that you can pay to have run is criminal and eviction background. Yes. And so we got a call one day from a guy that owns a building a couple doors down from us in Ventura in Port Hueneme, and he said, well, I'm having troubles with my tenants, getting quality tenants. I said, well, what do you look for? He says, all I care about is whether they've been evicted. I said, well, that's a problem right there. You got to be looking at more than that. You got to be looking at what their credit scores are.
If you see an eviction, is that an automatic no?
I think
it would be for us.
It's a red flag for us.
It's a red flag.
Have you had to evict before? And
absolutely.
So why and what was your biggest lesson from it?
Sure. So at first, before we really learned what we think is our business model, we weren't running credit. And so, shame on us. We were to blame. It wasn't the tenant's fault. They were that way before we ever met them. So historically, the problems were not paying the rent. And when we have taken tenants that didn't have decent credit and we listened to a story, no good deed goes unpunished. So that was our problem. Now, Rosalina touched on the new building we bought, and I want to make sure and get this point across because it tells the power of apartment investing. We bought this building in January. 4 of the tenants of the 8 tenants are Section 8. I went to one of the managers at the Section 8 office and I said, does the statewide rent control apply to Section 8 tenants? No, does not. You can raise to market. The last owner, husband and wife, long-term owners, hadn't raised the rents in years. So we've raised the rents on 3 tenants in the first 90 days, $1,000. Now, if you take that $1,000 and multiply it annually, and then take the gross rent multiplier that we purchased the building on, you can't spend equity, but we've raised the value of the property by over $165,000.
And is the raise in, like, for example, those cases, are they covered by the Section 8 or also partially borne by the tenant directly?
It's probably, in this case, 80-90% covered by Section 8.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's like almost price insensitive, right? Because it's just paid out by the government.
It's paid off by the government. And I don't want to give anybody the wrong idea. We're not here to gouge. We're not here to raise rents above market, because the market is pretty efficient and it will tell us when we're charging too much. So that's not our goal. Our goal was to get rents up to market because we had a big mortgage. We just bought the property.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean from the tenant's perspective, they just see it as like, oh, it's $100 increase. Seems reasonable, right? Because that's all they pay, right?
Yeah, so we didn't get any pushback.
Yeah, makes sense. So is it fair to say then that based on your past eviction experience, like if there's, you leave listeners with one, only one takeaway, it is that credit is like the most important screening factor for, maximizing the chance of a quality tenant?
Yeah, it is really the most important for us, the credit.
Okay. We were also chatting earlier about, sort of the rehabbing work that you do. And it sounded like you actually self-manage a lot of your units. You have a plumber, you have a handyman, et cetera. With 25 doors, can you talk about like why you choose to self-manage? Isn't it a lot of work?
Yeah, not anymore.
Well, like I said earlier, not to sound corny, Rosalina and I have been married over 35 years. We not only love each other, we like each other. And we wanted to find something that we could do together for the rest of our lives. And we find this is a great way because I have faults that she makes up for and vice versa. And so we think we make a good team. And the reason we manage ourselves is we bought our first building, we inherited the manager from the seller, and it was a horrible experience.
Yes.
And we had a turnover of tenants that would choke a horse. And my father, who was a real hard charger, type A personality, looked at me one day and said, "John, you and Rosalina know how to flip properties. You need to learn how to manage properties." And so we fired him immediately, and we took our youngest son, that's very handy, and he and we learned how to manage. Now, we didn't learn, that's not the way you want to learn on your own. So we went to some people that were experienced. We went to one of Rosalina's cousins who has 20 some odd units in East LA. We went to the guy who sold us the building.
And my brother.
And your brothers. And we talked to all three of them about what were the best practices that they used. The other thing is when you buy a building, Andrew, you know this, you run on fairly thin margins.
Yes.
And so paying 5 or 10% right off the top to a property manager was not going to achieve what we wanted to financially. And also we have found, and I don't want to paint with a broad brush, property managers don't have the skin in the game that we do.
Yeah, they certainly don't, because they're not ultimately at the end of the day owners. But I mean, that cost is being paid one way or another, and you're paying it through your time. And at 25 units, and it may still be manageable, but as you scale up more, you're going to be stretched thinner and thinner. I guess one question is like, at what point would it make sense to transition to using property management, or how have you started to think about this? Because I think that's one of the main things that can prevent investors from, breaking through to the next level.
I'd say Rosalina and I have talked about this. We think 50 units is probably the cap for us.
Yeah. And then at that point, you probably get some help, it sounds like.
We think, yeah, at that point.
That's still amazing that, mom and pop, you guys can self-manage 50 units. That's
Andrew. We did this while we were working full time at high pressure, high demand corporate jobs.
Yes.
Your weekends are spent not going to Disneyland, but they're spent cleaning up bathrooms and in vacant units.
I get it. I'm wondering. So I get the love and like each other part. You want to spend time together.
Yeah.
But it's work at the end of the day, and after working a long day in a corporate job, you can definitely be motivated to do real estate work after hours and on the weekends, but the more units, the more work, and then the more just the less time you have for just rest, right? And how do you not lose your sanity from
I think one of the keys that is, I think, experience doing this thing over and over and over. What we do when we get a job done, like in one of the apartments, make sure that even if it costs us a little bit more, that it's done right. And that avoids calling at midnight. We never have a phone call at midnight, really.
Never.
Ever. Because we spend money getting the whole unit set up so we don't get all these phone calls. And yes, we do. The sink is plugged or whatever. Sometimes we can even do it ourselves. But we fix it so well now that we don't spend a lot of time doing that kind of work. We have a gardener that takes care of all the places. And we don't spend that much time, really.
So maybe that's a good point, Andrew. Right. Once we get the property up and running, and what we found, because we didn't really get a chance to touch on our complete business model. So once we've rehabbed these units and we get quality tenants in,
yes,
the time involved becomes very little. Now, that doesn't mean we armchair manage. We go by our properties at least once a week.
Yes.
We walk them. We make sure everything is looking the way it should. And we talk to tenants and find out we don't solicit issues, but if they have problems, they're going to tell us, and we'll address them immediately. But once, like this property that we just bought, it's going to take a year or two to get tenants to understand our expectations. It doesn't mean that we're right, and it doesn't mean they have to live there. But if we're going to coexist together in our business relationship, we expect the place to be clean and neat on the outside. We expect them to be respectful. And once we set that in place, we're not spending a lot of time. It's not like we're spending evenings and weekends on these places. They don't run themselves, but it's a very small amount of time. So 50 units could be scalable. Understanding that first year or two on any new property is going to take time.
And we have our washing machines that we go and collect the quarters.
Oh, that's kind of fun. So we learned from the first guy we bought a building from, try to put in washers and dryers. It's an accommodation for the tenants. You really don't make any money. What you do is you provide them a convenience so they don't have to go to a laundromat.
You're talking about coin operated or inside the unit?
Well, we really don't encourage inside the unit because then you have all sorts of sewer issues and everything. And so we do coin op machines, and it pays for part of the water bill, and then tenants don't have to. And what we do is we try not to have one machine, because think about it, in an 8-unit building, like we just bought this building, there's one washer and one dryer. No one in their right minds can do all their laundry like that. So we unfortunately in this building inherited a long-term lease, and when it expires, we'll put our own machines in. We're going to push out a wall that's in the laundry room and put 2 washers and 2 dryers and a table in. And then that way you will get usage. You'll make, on a 6-unit building, we probably make in excess of $200 a month. On an 8-unit building, we should be making $250 a month once we have proper setup. Okay,
so you talked earlier about how, in the first building you purchased, you were trying to learn quickly how to self-manage. It sounded like you actually went back to the seller for tips. Maybe Rosalina, you went to your brothers. So what are some of the best practices you learned now, actually over the years, for how to self-manage efficiently and effectively?
Okay, let's see here.
Oh, wow. You actually wrote something down. Nice.
I'm at an age where if I don't, I might not remember it. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I would say some of the lessons and best practices. Obviously, the key to running a successful business is having a property in a decent location, having a property that is in good condition so you attract quality tenants, and then picking quality tenants. And I don't want to oversimplify, but if you do those 3 things, you're well on your way to having a property that doesn't take, like Rosalina said, we're not getting calls at midnight. We've never gotten one of those. We have happy tenants. They pay on time. We look for working class neighborhoods where we have essential workers. And we have a long range goal. We're trying to build, wealth has become kind of a dirty word in our society, so I use it in a limited manner, but we're trying to build generational wealth. And there has to be one family member in the generational line that's willing to take the hit and not go to Europe all the time, and sacrifice some weekends, sacrifice some money, cobble together, do things wealth managers would tell you not to do to buy that first building. That's the hardest. You buy that first building, it's the toughest. And it took us 5 years before we could ever get the second building.
Yes.
But once you get your first and second building, it becomes much easier.
So what are the best practices you've learned about self-managing then?
Well, I think we've kind of outlined them.
I meant like in terms of like almost like property management. So I imagine you probably have some systems or processes that you now have for making sure that the time that you spend managing a unit / tenant, and that might include everything from rent collection to addressing maintenance issues to whatever remodeling, as efficient as possible, so that with the time that you do invest, you're getting kind of the maximum impact. And I was curious, like, what are some of those best practices, if you have any?
Okay, so you have to set the expectations with folks. And again, it's not about getting a late fee, but I will tell you that when you don't impose a late fee right off the bat, it's human nature. People will start to pay later and later and later.
And it takes a lot of our time.
Takes a lot of our time. And so what we want to do is, honestly, by the 8th of the month or the 10th of the month, we need to know we have all the rents in. We've got to make the mortgage payment. We've got to pay the utility bills. So one of the key things is getting tenants to pay within the first 5 days of the month. We usually put a grace period in. Sometimes we don't. And to minimize the time we spend getting the rents in, and then if we have the proper tenant base and the places are in decent shape, and like you said earlier, Rosalina, fixing the place up and not going with the cheapest fix, you're going to really hurt yourself.
That's really our key motto. We fix them right. Pretty much everything works. Starts with the credit, who we select in that place. Because if you select someone like the new building, we have a lot of problems sending us texts, or just trying to complain, and we get out of there. That is not our issue. You need to figure out how to deal with that. So we eliminate a lot of the time-consuming issues. So our concern is that they're safe in that environment, that everything is working right in their apartment, and that they pay on time.
What's an example of like a complaint that is not the landlord's issue?
Sure. So we don't feed into drama. One of the things that attracted me to Rosalina was her personality is like this. She's fantastically interesting, but there's no drama. And I hope she feels the same about me. And so we don't want that with tenants. And so we got a text from a tenant the other day. Could you please tell the tenant in unit X, Y, and Z to make sure and curb their dog properly? Well, a new building, and we've already had some issues with this tenant that she's referring to. I think poking the bear is not always the best idea.
You're right.
And so these things where there's a kind of a bit of inter-scene warfare between some of the tenants, that'll eventually subside, especially if we don't feed into it. And we can't take sides, and you don't want to take sides. And if there was ever, so you asked the question, so what are these things that are relatively petty? And we'll phrase it that way without trying to insult someone, because we try to treat our tenants who are our customers with the level of respect that we would treat the head of Tesla or the head of Exxon. Treat them the same way because they deserve it. And frankly, a lot of them don't get treated that way. And people will respond to that level of respect in most cases.
Do you ever worry about litigation? So like if you get a complaint from a tenant that says, hey, can you tell the neighbor to curb their dog or leash their dog? And you're like, I can't get involved. And then, I don't know, the dog bites, the neighbor, they may come after you. It's like your property, it's happening on your property. You knew about it. You had reason to know about it, et cetera. Like, do you worry about these kind of things?
Well, sure. Now, if it rose to the level of a dog that was aggressive or there was a chance it might bite, absolutely we would get involved. And we have gotten involved. Yeah. We had a fellow who moved in and then gave us a letter about a comfort animal. And we said, well, okay, we understand that you can have a comfort animal, but what kind of an animal is it? What kind of a dog is it? If it's an aggressive breed, we are going to have a problem. So we are sensitive to what and we don't want to get sued. I have a law degree. The last thing I want to do is see us get sued.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to ask briefly about Section 8. I know in our kind of offline discussion, you mentioned about a third of your rentals are Section 8. I was curious, so there's some obvious benefits because Section 8 pays on time every single month. There's no pushback. It's very mechanical. It's paid out by the government. Are there any downsides to Section 8?
Selecting the wrong tenant.
So Rosalina has figured out the secret sauce for Section 8. And
Which
Section
is?
8 doesn't have the greatest reputation in some cities. We are great supporters of Section 8. Section 8, we're in Port Hueneme, we're in Oxnard, we're now in County of Ventura that handles Camarillo. And Rosalina has forged very strong relationships with individuals in each of those cities, Section 8 offices. And they appreciate her to the extent that they now refer prospective tenants to Rosalina because they know what she's about. They know what we're about, that we're going to be respectful landlords. And Section 8 pays on time, like you said, Andrew. But the other thing is tenants are grateful because a lot of landlords won't take Section 8, even though by law they can't discriminate. What happens is we hold an open house and a Section 8 prospect, the first question they always ask, not sometimes, always, do you accept Section 8?
Yeah.
That's because a lot don't.
Mm-hmm.
So like Rosalina said, we treat their application the way we would any other application. They have to have decent credit. They have to have a job, and the profile that Rosalina and I have seen, not all the time, but generally, single mom, couple of kids, the dad's not in the picture. She's not looking for a handout. She just wants a helping hand.
So when you say secret sauce to Section 8, are you referring to the relationships then that Rosalina has built with Section 8 offices, or something different?
No, I think it's as simple. Rosalina mentioned it right off the top. It's the tenant that you pick.
Yeah.
So you're not forced to take any one tenant. And we have found, like the most recent Section 8 tenant that we put into a unit, 800 credit score. They lived in their last apartment 20 years. The only reason they moved was the landlord was selling the building.
Yeah. Okay. So as you look to the future, it sounds like you're still actively acquiring. Back in January, it sounds like you just purchased a building back in January.
Yeah.
At what point do you say to yourself, we have enough units. It's a good time for us to relax, enjoy life, travel. Like, when is enough for you guys?
All right. So our oldest son, who we're sitting here in his offices, would say, "You've done enough. Sit back and relax." Her oldest brother, "You've done enough. Sit back and relax." Neither of them have sat back and relaxed. So
they're young. Well, I don't know about the brother. Brother may be similarly aged, but your son is still, young. So.
Very young.
Yeah.
So we talk about this a lot. That was really an intriguing question. We have found in our lives, personally and professionally, that when we tread water, we fail. We fail big time. And so for us, there is no end. We bought a building from, in Port Hueneme, a woman who was 90. Her husband, they were married 70 years. He had just passed away, and she said, "I'm done." So she sold the building, took her 3 daughters to Europe for 5 weeks. Well, the problem there from a tax standpoint is now you got to recoup all the depreciation and the profit on the building.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Our attitude, like my dad would say, is we're going to leave that problem to our heirs.
They may not have that problem. They get a step up in basis.
Yeah, they get a step up.
Yeah.
So we would much rather have that happen.
Yeah, but I guess because you're still actively acquiring. So, but it sounds like because mostly you enjoy it. I mean, that's what I kind of.
We like it, and we're not going to stop.
It is our passion. We really enjoy it, and when we have the opportunity to help families get started, we feel this great reward that we are able to do that, and we don't have the pressure of the money, but we want to help them get started, buy their first property, think about how they're going to invest in the future. That is where we get great satisfaction. So we don't think about ending right now that's not on our plan yet.
I think
By
we
the
got
way,
15 years
sorry,
of,
go ahead.
I think we have 15 years of running room. We're in our late 60s. We'll do it till our early 80s, and then
Well, God willing, you know.
well, you'll be
hopefully.
here. You can do it.
Oh dear. One thing I wanted to ask, I forgot to ask earlier, but I was curious, how are you like sourcing your deals? Are you buying them from brokers? Like, are you using brokers for prospecting leads? Are you driving around and knocking on doors? Are you doing cold calls? Like, how are you sourcing your deals?
Real estate.
So I would say that every property we've purchased, we don't go to foreclosure sales. We haven't found the need to. We have called some brokers, but typically we're on Redfin now that we're in the MLS because we're agents. We look on the MLS, but these are properties available to anyone, and that's why we think our story for what we did, it's not about us, but what we are doing is so compelling because we don't have some secret avenue to find properties. We look on Redfin, we look on the MLS, we look on Realtor.com.
But those don't often advertise like 8 unit. They'll advertise 4 or 5, but they don't tend to advertise the higher number of unit buildings.
Okay, so LoopNet, you can go to LoopNet.
Yes.
So we were kind of surprised we saw this 8 unit as well. And so Rosalina is one of these people that will swing for the fences. So she sees this 8 unit and we're in a 3 unit building. And how in the heck are we going to get to 8 units? So the 3 unit building, if you'll humor me, I pull up one day and a couple of the tenants come up to me and go, hey, there's bullet holes around here.
Oh, man.
Well, that's not good.
Yeah, you think.
So we maybe decided that wasn't for us. That property, not apartment ownership, that property was in a sketchy part of Oxnard. So we put it on the market and got half a dozen offers in 48 hours. And we took the offer that was not the highest offer because he was willing to work with us on a 1031 exchange. It was all cash, no contingencies at all. He didn't even go inside the units. So he said, I'll sign off removing all contingencies. You can take as long as you want to find a building. Rosalina finds an 8 unit building. How in God's green acre are we had half the money coming out of the 1031, the downlink. How are we going to buy this thing? Rosalina has a famous line. She says to me, John, if you want it, you always figure out a way to do it with your background. When I want it, you seem to find a way to not do it. And so we went to a broker that we knew, and we got a couple of hard money loans. We did a hard money loan on the property in Port Hueneme, and we took a second on another property. And so we had half the money from coming out of the down leg. We had about another, 15% in cash we had. And then we had to borrow a couple $100,000 off of these hard money loans.
Yeah.
So this year is a little tougher for us that way because we got to pay off the hard money loans and refinance out of one of them, which we're happy to do. And beginning of next year, we're out of those, and the hard money lender understands it and is fully supportive of us. And so, anyhow, I kind of strayed off, but that's how.
Okay, so do you plan to sell your holdings eventually? If not, what's the end game?
Okay, so if you see people like, and we would never compare ourselves to these people, but these fabulously wealthy people that don't believe in leaving much to their kids because their kids, by gosh, they need to work hard and make their own way. Well, if we had $100 billion, we might think that way too. We're not at a point to open a family office, for gosh sakes. We hope that our grandchildren have enough wealth based on what we started to open a family office. But no, we're not going to sell, Andrew. If we can hold on to these, our goal is to get to 50 units before we die, pass these on to our kids. We think we have 3 sons and 2 grandsons so far, and we think we've raised them with a work ethic, a sense of loyalty, compassion.
Hard work.
Yeah, hard work, yeah. And honesty. And we hope that they leverage the living daylights out of these things when we die to no more than 50% loan to value, take a couple $1,000,000 and go buy more, but don't sell what we've started with. And, you know, it's a very simple process, this whole concept of BRRRR, right? Buy, remodel, raise rents, refinance, repeat. Okay, it's a very simple process. We adhere to it. We didn't know what it was, but we saw it online, and now we know that's what we've been doing. But we're not selling. That's our.
All right. John, Rosalina, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. This has been awesome. You know, it's such a pleasure to learn a little bit about your real estate journey. Where can listeners find out more about you and what you're up to?
Sure. Well, if you look right behind us, there's our web page. It's you'll go into the first page of the web page. It's got a picture of our house. It's got our names on it. Looks just like this, and it's got a little bit of our story. It shows some of the properties we've sold. We only became real estate agents not too long ago because a couple of reasons. We wanted to kind of in a I don't want to sound like we're proselytizing, but we do believe that what we have happened upon, our business model, is something that works, and it's not rocket science, and it can be done with discipline and consistency. And our phone number's up there if somebody wants to call us, and we also mitigate our transaction costs.
All right. Well, we'll definitely link to your realty website in the show notes, and look forward to sharing this with our audience. Thanks so much again for taking the time to chat with me.
Thank you.
Cheers. Take care.